When it comes to Hollywood tough guys, few names stand out as brightly as the legends that dominated the silver screen during the 60s, 70s, and beyond. These men weren't just actors. They were icons, tough, unflinching, and unapologetically raw in their portrayals of strength, grit, and often vulnerability. They embodied what it meant to be tough, not just through their muscles, but in their actions, their principles, and their larger-than-life presence. But who were the men who stood out to one of Hollywood's toughest actors of all time, William Smith? Known for his roles in Laredo and Rich Man, Poor Man, Smith earned his reputation as a hard-as-nails leading man and villain, able to go toe-to-toe with some of the most iconic actors in Hollywood. Smith's performances, steeped in authenticity and physical prowess, were only matched by his respect for other actors in the business, those who were able to redefine what it meant to be tough on screen. But it's not just about muscles, stunts, and explosive action sequences. These tough guys knew that true strength was something deeper. It was about presence, an ability to command attention even without uttering a word. It was about portraying not just the grizzled exterior, but the complex emotions and motivations that made these characters tick. This is what made the men on Smith's list not only unforgettable, but untouchable in the world of action and drama. In this video, we're diving into the legendary actors that William Smith revered, respected, and admired. These were the tough guys who defined a generation and left their mark on Hollywood. Some were known for their physicality and commanding presence, while others took on the roles of antiheroes or villains, playing characters who blurred the lines between good and evil. What connected these men was an undeniable ability to make audiences believe in their strength, even when it wasn't always obvious. So, what made these actors so special in the eyes of William Smith? Was it their physical toughness? Their no-nonsense approach to acting? Or perhaps it was something deeper, an unspoken bond among actors who lived by the same code, knew the unglamorous side of Hollywood, and respected the craft of embodying a tough persona. In this video, we'll uncover the men who inspired one of Hollywood's own tough guys, William Smith. Get ready to discover the names, the stories, and the legendary moments that shaped the genre and created timeless tough guy icons. Stick around, because you won't want to miss the surprising and insightful picks from William Smith's personal list of Hollywood's toughest men. When you think of pure, unshakable toughness on screen, Charles Bronson's face probably flashes in your mind, stone cold, unreadable, and borderline terrifying in his silence. But that quiet wasn't weakness. It was power. And for William Smith, Bronson represented the kind of hard-earned grit that couldn't be faked with a script or makeup. This wasn't just a guy playing a badass, he was one. Bronson didn't need to yell to get your attention. His silence was the threat. His presence alone could freeze a room. He built a reputation on roles that didn't require charm or clever dialogue. He didn't joke, he didn't explain, he just acted, and when he acted, people listened. William Smith was all about authenticity, and to him, Bronson was as real as it got. What made Bronson stand out wasn't just his intensity, it was the fact that everything about him looked lived in. The rough face, the quiet stare, the body language of a man who had seen too much. He wasn't Hollywood polished, and that's exactly what made him so dangerous. In a town full of pretty faces pretending to be tough, Bronson made you believe he had nothing to prove, and that scared people more than any line in a script. Smith admired that. He respected actors who didn't chase the spotlight but let their work do the talking. And Bronson was the king of that. He didn't play the Hollywood game, didn't chase interviews, didn't smile for the cameras. He showed up, delivered bone-crushing performances, and vanished. That kind of discipline, that kind of mystery, it hit hard with someone like Smith, who came from the same mold. The two never had a flashy rivalry or dramatic falling out, but they didn't need one. Their connection came from understanding what it meant to survive in an industry that tried to polish off your edges. Bronson kept his edges sharp and intimidating. And Smith saw that and nodded, like, yeah, this guy gets it. For Smith, Charles Bronson wasn't just another actor in the tough guy category. He was the template. The one others copied but never quite matched. You could tell Bronson had lived through some real stuff. There was history behind every glare. And in a world full of phonies pretending to be wolves, Bronson was the quiet, lone one that actually had teeth. But as tough as Bronson looked, there was something even colder underneath: restraint. He knew when not to act, and that's what made him terrifying. That stillness, that waiting, it's what Smith respected most, because anyone can throw a punch. But not everyone can hold back and still make you flinch. And if you thought that was intense, wait until you hear who really got under Smith's skin next. Lee Marvin didn't just act in war films and gritty thrillers, he practically lived them. Every line that came out of his mouth carried the weight of a man who'd seen some things he didn't care to talk about. And for William Smith, that was exactly the kind of no-nonsense, pain-weathered presence that deserved respect. But here's the twist. Smith didn't just admire Marvin, he was also a little wary of him. See, Marvin wasn't acting when he brought that deadpan glare and slow-burning rage to the screen. That wasn't theater. That was Marvin being Marvin. No fake bravado, no over-the-top flexing. He had a vibe that said, "If you push me, I'll break you," and you believed him. That type of authenticity made Smith pay attention. What made Lee Marvin stand out to Smith wasn't his volume, it was his precision. He didn't need to move much, but when he did, you felt it. He could stare down a man with more impact than a room full of shouting tough guys. His power was in the pauses, in the stillness. He'd let the tension simmer and then explode in a way that felt earned, not staged. There was a respect between Smith and Marvin, no doubt. But it wasn't the handshake and backslap kind. It was more like two wolves circling each other, recognizing they came from the same brutal pack. You didn't mess with Marvin unless you were ready to deal with real consequences. And Smith, tough as he was, knew not to test those waters. Off camera, Marvin was known for being unpredictable. One minute he was telling a story in that gravelly voice of his. The next minute he was storming out of a room because someone looked at him the wrong way. He had zero patience for fake people or Hollywood fluff, and Smith respected that. But at the same time, Marvin's temper made him hard to pin down. And in Smith's world, that kind of volatility could turn dangerous real quick. Still, Smith couldn't deny the man's screen presence. Marvin didn't just play the villain or the anti-hero, he was the blueprint for it. There was a weight to everything he did. Even his silences were loud. And when you saw him on screen, you didn't look away, not because he was flashy, but because he could snap at any moment. That unpredictability, that's what made him unforgettable. To Smith, Marvin was like a loaded weapon left on the table, silent, but impossible to ignore. You didn't know when it would go off, but you knew it would. And while Smith didn't openly call him a friend, he sure as hell knew better than to call him an enemy. There are actors who act tough, and then there's Clint Eastwood, a man who made the quiet stare more threatening than a drawn gun. For William Smith, Eastwood wasn't just another Hollywood Hardman. He was the embodiment of calm under pressure, a kind of storm you never saw coming. And that made him one of the most respected and feared men in the business. Eastwood didn't roar. He whispered. He didn't flail around in a fight scene. He just stood still, eyes locked, hand hovering near his holster. And somehow that was enough. William Smith recognized early on that Eastwood had something special. It wasn't the lines he delivered, it was the pauses in between. That famous squint, the slow turn of his head, the silence before he spoke. That was real tension. That was control. The two crossed paths in a way that fans still talk about. A brutal, bare-knuckle brawl in a film where Smith was cast as the one man who could take Eastwood toe-to-toe. But even in that scene, Smith knew the fight wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Eastwood didn't just fight with his fists, he fought with presence. Every movement, every second he took to react was a move in a game of mental chess. Smith had fought plenty of guys on screen, but that was different. That was a test. What struck Smith the most was Eastwood's focus. No matter the chaos around him, Eastwood never lost control. He wasn't just playing a character, he was a character. There were no flashy gimmicks, no over-the-top violence. Just steady pacing, raw tension, and the sense that if you pushed him too far, he'd snap and you wouldn't see it coming. Off-screen, Eastwood was equally precise. He knew what he wanted on set. He didn't waste time with small talk or ego battles. He respected professionalism and expected it in return. That's something Smith could relate to. There was no need for posturing when the work spoke louder than any bragging ever could. And Eastwood's work, it echoed through generations. Smith admired the fact that Eastwood evolved without losing his edge. He went from the spaghetti western gunslinger to a director shaping his own stories, and the toughness followed him every step of the way. That's the mark of someone who isn't faking it. You don't just play tough for 60 years. You have to be it. In William Smith's eyes, Eastwood wasn't about being the loudest guy in a room. He was the guy everyone watched. He didn't ask for power. He carried it. And that, more than anything, is what made him dangerous. But as intense as Eastwood was, the next man on Smith's list had a totally different kind of danger. He didn't just command the screen. He owned it, with charisma that could charm you into forgetting just how lethal he really was. There's tough, and then there's effortlessly tough. James Coburn had a presence that didn't need to growl or flex. He could walk into a room with that lean frame, those steely eyes, and a sly smile, and somehow command total attention. William Smith didn't just admire Coburn's swagger. He respected the razor-sharp edge beneath it. Coburn was the kind of guy who could throw a punch or crack a joke, and either way you believed it. Smith saw that rare ability in only a handful of actors. It wasn't about size or volume, it was about precision. Coburn never tried too hard. He didn't need to. Whether he was in a Western shootout or a spy caper, he moved like a man who already knew he was going to win. What impressed Smith most wasn't just Coburn's screen presence, it was his discipline. Behind the scenes, Coburn had a deep interest in martial arts, which immediately caught Smith's attention. Both men were fascinated by control, not just physical control, but emotional control. Smith once remarked that Coburn didn't just look cool. He was cool. Not the fake Hollywood kind, but the kind that comes from years of focus, self-awareness, and training. Their off-screen bond grew stronger through shared philosophy. Both believed in doing the work, not just looking the part. Coburn trained under martial arts legends, and he brought that same sharpness to his acting. He was quick, calculated, and didn't waste energy. In a business where many actors overdid it, Coburn was like a blade, lean, clean, and deadly effective. Smith also admired Coburn's versatility. One moment, he could be the charming rogue. The next, a stone-cold killer. And somehow, he never seemed to break a sweat. That kind of control made him unpredictable. And in Smith's world, that's what made someone truly dangerous. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to threaten. You just knew not to cross him. But what really stuck with Smith was how Coburn brought intelligence into every role. He played characters who were always one step ahead, reading the room, staying calm while others fell apart. Smith appreciated that tactical mindset. In many ways, he saw Coburn as a quiet tactician, someone who won battles not just with brawn, but with brains. Even during casual conversations, Coburn had a way of making you feel like you were being studied. Not in a threatening way, more like he was reading your soul. It was that inner stillness, that unspoken sharpness, that made him dangerous. To Smith, Coburn wasn't just a co-star, he was a peer in the art of understated power. And while many tough guys shouted their way through scenes, Coburn just smiled and made you nervous doing it. But coming up next was someone who didn't just move cool, he lived like a wild card, and his name still echoes with rebellion. Steve McQueen didn't follow rules. He broke them, casually, confidently, and often without apology. To William Smith, McQueen was a rare breed of actor who didn't just play rebels, he was one. On screen and off, McQueen had that combustible energy. You never quite knew what he'd do next, and that unpredictability made him magnetic. In a town full of pretenders, McQueen was the real deal. Smith respected McQueen for exactly that reason. Hollywood had plenty of tough guys, but most of them were manufactured. McQueen? He lived the life. Fast cars, high-risk stunts, a streak of defiance that kept directors on edge. He wasn't acting. That was just who he was. And to a man like Smith, who valued authenticity above everything, McQueen was more than just a colleague. He was a kindred spirit. One thing Smith always admired was McQueen's relentless push for realism. He insisted on doing his own stunts, even when insurance companies begged him not to. He believed the audience could feel it when something was real. And he wasn't wrong. Whether it was burning rubber in Bullet or jumping fences in The Great Escape, McQueen didn't just sell the moment, he was the moment. Their paths didn't cross as often as Smith might have liked, but the mutual respect was there. Both men had that outsider energy, unpolished, unfiltered, and unwilling to play Hollywood's political game. McQueen was known to walk off sets if he didn't like the way things were being run. He didn't care about playing nice, he cared about getting it right. Smith could relate. But McQueen wasn't just a thrill junkie. Underneath that cool exterior was someone deeply strategic. He knew his image and guarded it fiercely. Every film choice, every public appearance, it was all calculated. And it worked. He became the king of cool, not by chasing fame, but by doing the opposite, rejecting anything that felt fake. There was also a darker edge to McQueen that Smith recognized, a constant restlessness, a need to prove something. Even at the height of his fame, McQueen never seemed at peace. He raced, he fought, he pushed himself to the edge. It was like he had to keep moving, or he'd collapse under the weight of it all. Smith understood that kind of drive. For some men, standing still felt more dangerous than crashing at full speed. McQueen's toughness wasn't loud. It was in the quiet stare, the clenched jaw, the way he lit a cigarette like it was his last. He made you believe he could take a punch and throw one harder. That's what made him dangerous. Not the volume, but the vibe. To Smith, McQueen was one of the few who didn't just play a rebel, he embodied rebellion. And in a world full of masks, that kind of rawness was rare. Fred Williamson's name in Hollywood was synonymous with power, raw, unapologetic, and electric. But what set Williamson apart wasn't just his muscular physique or his knack for tough guy roles. It was his ability to take what Hollywood had given him and turn it into something entirely his own. He wasn't just an actor, he was an empire in the making. For William Smith, Williamson wasn't just another action star. He was a pioneer. At a time when Hollywood's representation of black men was often reduced to sidekicks or villains, Williamson flipped the script. The actor, formerly an NFL player, took the rough-and-tumble toughness he developed on the football field and transferred it seamlessly to the screen. With roles in Black Caesar, Hammer, and a slew of other blaxploitation films, Williamson became a larger-than-life figure, proving that he wasn't just a footballer trying to act, he was an actor changing the game. Smith admired Williamson for his ability to take charge in a room, both on and off screen. It wasn't just his striking physical presence. It was his mind. Fred knew how to navigate Hollywood's racial politics, turning what many saw as a genre for exploitation into an avenue for empowerment. Every role was a statement. Every line of dialogue a declaration of independence. For Smith, who knew how to make an impact with a single punch or look, Williamson was a kindred spirit in the way he commanded attention and defied expectations. The respect between Smith and Williamson was mutual. They shared a bond forged through their roles in action films, where the stakes were high, and every fight scene felt like a battle for survival. But it wasn't just on-screen battles that shaped their camaraderie. It was the way they both understood the business of Hollywood. Williamson, like Smith, knew the importance of making his own rules. He didn't wait for Hollywood to give him the parts he wanted. He went out and created them. He even took his producing career into his own hands, making films that were as bold and brash as his performances. Their friendship wasn't just built on shared roles or mutual respect. It was also the recognition that they both had a hand in shaping the tough guy genre, particularly in the 70s and 80s. While Smith was known for his gruff, no-nonsense characters, Williamson was cementing his reputation as one of the most influential black action stars in Hollywood. Their films, even if only connected by the theme of toughness, were a reminder that they were both pushing boundaries and proving that the genre could evolve. Off-screen, Fred Williamson had an energy that was all his own. He carried himself like a king, confident, charismatic, and aware of his place in the industry. He didn't just want to be an actor, he wanted to be a cultural force. And for Smith, watching Williamson carve his path through a system that often marginalized him was as inspiring as any action scene they'd shared together. But up next, we take a look at a man who wasn't just playing tough, he was tough in real life. A man who earned his stripes in the military and carried that discipline with him to the silver screen. Telly Savales may best be known for his iconic role as Kojak, the tough, bald, and no-nonsense cop, but the truth is his career spanned much more than just TV crime dramas. He was one of Hollywood's most formidable tough guys, capable of delivering a blend of menace and charm with effortless ease. But for William Smith, there was something particularly intriguing about Savales' raw, unpolished approach to acting that made him stand out. Savales wasn't the traditional action star who relied solely on muscle or brawn to command attention. No, his true power came from his ability to create tension without even raising his voice. When Savales spoke, every word seemed to carry weight. He didn't need to yell, and he certainly didn't need to throw punches in every scene to make an impact. It was his quiet confidence, his steely eyes, and his trademark lollipop that defined his aura. For Smith, Savales' ability to control the room with just his presence was something to admire. Smith and Savales crossed paths a few times throughout their careers, and Smith couldn't help but respect the unique way Savales navigated Hollywood. While many actors fell victim to typecasting, Savales was one of those rare individuals who refused to be confined by a single role. He played gangsters, soldiers, and detectives, but he always did so with a level of complexity and depth that left audiences hooked. Whether he was the calculating villain or the unpredictable anti-hero, Savales always added something extra to his performances. The two men had a similar approach when it came to their tough guy roles. Both understood the art of building suspense without overdoing it. For Smith, this was a shared philosophy. His roles in films like Any Which Way But Loose and The Ridiculous Six were grounded in the idea that toughness didn't need to be screamed from the rooftops. Instead, it was about timing, presence, and knowing when to turn it on, and Savales was a master of that. Savales' ability to remain calm in even the most chaotic situations was something that resonated with Smith. Off-screen, Savales was known to be down-to-earth and approachable, a stark contrast to the ruthless, dangerous characters he played. This balance of professionalism and warmth was something Smith respected deeply, as it reflected the idea that the toughest characters on screen could often be the most layered and intriguing individuals. And while Savales was often seen as the tough, calculated, and at times even cold figure in his roles, there was a vulnerability to him that made his performances stand out. It was this complexity that drew William Smith to Savales, the understanding that in every tough guy, there was also a person with a past, flaws, and a hidden depth. As the two actors built their own legacies, they did so in a way that would stand the test of time. They knew that the key to being remembered as Hollywood tough guys wasn't just about flexing muscle. It was about being memorable, multifaceted, and unpredictable. Savales embodied all of that. But in the world of action stars, there's one man whose presence, whether on or off screen, simply couldn't be ignored. His undeniable energy and explosive personality made him a force to be reckoned with, both in film and in life. In our next section, we're diving into the world of an actor whose toughness was matched only by his unpredictable spirit. When you think of Hollywood tough guys, Robert Duval might not be the first name that comes to mind. But to William Smith, Duval represents a quiet, powerful kind of toughness that was perhaps more rare in the industry. Known for his performances in The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and Lonesome Dove, Duval carved out a space for himself as an actor who could deliver emotional depth alongside the grit and intensity often associated with the tough guy image. What Smith admired about Duval was his subtlety. While many of his peers played the role of tough men with a brash, loud energy, Duval had a quiet, composed intensity. In The Godfather, his portrayal of Tom Hagen, a calm and calculated consigliere, was a perfect example of Duval's ability to convey toughness without ever raising his voice. He wasn't the type to throw punches or shout insults. Instead, he was a character who commanded respect through his demeanor and intelligence. Smith recognized this approach as a rare, yet powerful, form of toughness that wasn't reliant on physicality. Off-screen, Duval was known to be down-to-earth and even somewhat reclusive, traits that Smith also appreciated. Both actors had a no-nonsense attitude when it came to their craft. They were professionals, and while they were known for playing tough, hard-edged roles, there was always a level of thoughtfulness behind their characters. For Smith, it was always about the story behind the character, and Duval's career was built on telling those nuanced, multifaceted stories of complicated individuals. Their paths crossed in Hollywood several times, but it was clear that while they may not have shared the same screen time as some of the other tough guy actors, Smith had an immense respect for Duval's ability to make audiences feel the power of a moment. Whether in a gritty war film or a western, Duval didn't need to be loud or flashy to steal the show. He simply embodied his roles with such depth that his presence was undeniable. What made Duval stand out to Smith was his diversity as an actor. He didn't just play one type of character. He played everything from the villain to the hero, from the cowboy to the soldier. This range was something Smith found admirable, especially in an era where many actors became stuck in one particular type of role. Duval, however, was unafraid to take on challenging, often less glamorous parts that required him to dive deep into his character's psyches. In many ways, Robert Duval's success mirrored Smith's own desire to avoid being boxed into any one genre. For both men, their careers were defined by versatility, taking on a wide range of roles that showcased their ability to connect with audiences on a deeper level, rather than simply relying on the physical traits of the stereotypical tough guy. Duval may not have been the loudest or the flashiest in his films, but he left a lasting impression on viewers because of his nuanced performances. In the world of action-packed, bombastic tough guys, Duval's understated approach was a refreshing contrast, and it was something William Smith truly respected. With Duval, like Smith, there was a fierce dedication to craft, a focus on making every role memorable and multifaceted. It's no wonder that both of these men became legends in their own right, redefining what it means to be a tough guy in Hollywood. Bert Lancaster was not only a skilled actor, but a powerhouse of athleticism and charisma. Born and raised in New York, he had a passion for sports, which translated into an intense physicality on screen that became a hallmark of his performances. Known for films like From Here to Eternity, The Birdman of Alcatraz, and The Crimson Pirate, Lancaster embodied a raw, magnetic presence that made him one of the most respected stars of his era. What William Smith admired most about Lancaster was his ability to perform his own stunts, a practice that set him apart from many of his peers. With a background in circus acrobatics, Lancaster brought a level of physicality to his roles that seemed almost unrivaled at the time. Whether he was scaling a cliff face or engaging in a brutal fight, he did it all with an authenticity that was rare. Lancaster was not just acting tough, he was living the part. Their connection stemmed from a shared understanding of the importance of physical performance in acting. While some actors were more focused on dialogue or dramatic flair, Lancaster's success was built on his ability to translate physical action into emotional depth. Smith, too, had made a name for himself by showcasing his strength and grit on screen, which made him appreciate Lancaster's approach to the craft. For both men, it wasn't about acting tough for the sake of being tough, it was about committing to the role, body and soul. Their shared respect for physicality and tough guy roles made Lancaster a natural figure for Smith to admire. However, Lancaster's range went far beyond his athletic ability. He wasn't limited to action films. His nuanced performances in dramas like Elmer Gantry, for which he won an Academy Award, showed that he could embody the complexity of a character, giving depth to his tough exterior. His versatility, blending raw physicality with emotional gravitas, set a standard in Hollywood that Smith respected. Behind the scenes, Lancaster was known for his leadership and his approach to filmmaking. He wasn't just an actor, he was a producer and a driving force in the movies he was involved in. Lancaster's willingness to take creative risks and to push boundaries is something Smith respected. While their career paths didn't always intersect directly, Smith admired the kind of leadership Lancaster displayed, both on and off the screen. What set Lancaster apart from other tough guy actors was his integrity. While many actors of his time were known for their rough edges and off-screen antics, Lancaster was known for his professionalism. His personal life was more private, and he approached his career with a seriousness that matched his on-screen personas. His authenticity and dedication to his craft left a lasting impression on those who worked with him. It was this same kind of dedication that made him an enduring influence on other actors, including Smith. In the tough guy realm, Lancaster was a rare figure, a true athlete who brought depth, integrity, and power to every role he took on. Smith's admiration for Lancaster wasn't just about the physical presence he brought to his roles. It was also about his authenticity as an artist, someone who understood that toughness could go beyond physical brute force. It could be woven into a character's complexity, vulnerability, and strength. While not an actor himself, Sam Peckinpah's legacy looms large in the world of tough guy cinema. As a director, Peckinpah redefined the action genre with his gritty, violent films, and his influence on actors like William Smith is undeniable. Known for films like The Wild Bunch and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, Peckinpah was notorious for his unflinching approach to violence and human brutality. What made Peckinpah so important to Smith was not just his filmed shocking portrayal of violence, but his commitment to realism and authenticity. Unlike many directors who relied on stylized action or clean, polished violence, Peckinpah's style was raw and visceral. His focus on making every fight scene feel chaotic and desperate was something Smith admired. There was a reality to Peckinpah's action sequences that was almost uncomfortable to watch, but that was the point. Peckinpah didn't want to glorify violence. Instead, he wanted to showcase its impact and consequences. For Smith, the unflinching realism of Peckinpah's work was something that aligned with his own approach to tough guy roles. As an actor, Smith brought a gritty realism to his performances, making sure his fight scenes and physicality felt genuine. He appreciated how Peckinpah's direction made the audience feel the exhaustion, fear, and even pain that came with a fight or confrontation. Peckinpah didn't just show the hero triumphing, he showed the cost of violence, something Smith understood on a personal level. Smith also admired Peckinpah's ability to blend intense action with deep character development. Films like The Wild Bunch featured characters who were as complex and morally ambiguous as they were violent. This was a quality that Smith tried to bring to his own roles, making sure that his characters weren't simply tough guys, but men with real struggles, choices, and emotions. In this way, Peckinpah's films were more than just action movies. They were explorations of the human condition, albeit through a violent lens. Moreover, the way Peckinpah's films challenged traditional notions of masculinity and heroism was something that influenced a generation of actors, including Smith. Peckinpah's heroes were often tragic figures, men who had outlived their usefulness in a changing world and were struggling to find meaning in their violence. This type of anti-hero would later become a staple in Hollywood tough guy films, with Smith embodying similar characters who had both strength and vulnerability. Though Smith didn't always get the chance to work with Peckinpah directly, he drew from his films, especially in his portrayal of anti-heroes. Smith's characters, much like the ones in The Wild Bunch, were flawed and haunted by the realities of their violent actions. This made Smith's performances not just physical but emotionally charged, with characters who were wrestling with their place in a harsh, unforgiving world. Peckinpah's influence on the genre of action and tough guy cinema cannot be overstated. His films gave actors like Smith the opportunity to explore a different kind of toughness, one that was not just about physical strength, but about the emotional and psychological toll that violence took on a person. And for that, Smith held him in the highest regard. Jack Palance is one of those rare actors whose presence alone could send chills down your spine. With his sharp features, intense stare, and rugged demeanor, Palance became an icon of the tough guy genre, playing antagonists and morally ambiguous characters in films like Shane and City Slickers. His roles weren't just performances, they were manifestations of raw power and unrelenting menace. He embodied the kind of villainy that became legendary in Hollywood's action history. For William Smith, Palance was more than just a villain on screen. He was an actor who could seamlessly shift between being an intimidating antagonist and a tortured, vulnerable man, which made him a complex figure. Smith admired Palance's ability to fill the screen with just his presence, often without saying a word. There was an eerie sense of power in the way Palance could stand still and captivate the audience, something Smith wanted to replicate in his own performances. Unlike other actors who relied heavily on dialogue and exposition, Palance was a master at using silence as a tool of intimidation. His roles, particularly in westerns and crime dramas, were marked by a terrifying stillness, an ability to convey menace just through his eyes or posture. This was something Smith respected deeply, as he too understood the importance of nonverbal communication in a performance. He realized that sometimes the scariest moments weren't about the things characters said, but about the tension in the air before a fight broke out, the build-up before violence erupted. Palance excelled at creating that tension. Their shared love for the physicality of acting also linked them. While Palance might have been known for his tall, imposing figure, his fight scenes were always surprisingly agile and well-coordinated. Palance, like Smith, could bring an intensity to a physical confrontation that felt more authentic and raw than the typical choreographed sequences audiences were accustomed to. Both actors knew that a true tough guy fight was more about emotion than execution. The fear, anger, or desperation that fueled the movements was more important than whether or not the punches landed cleanly. This made their performances stand out and gave the audience something more than just the usual action movie brawls. Palance's versatility in roles also made him a fascinating figure in the tough guy landscape. Though he often played villains, he also showed his depth in portraying characters with moral ambiguity, such as in The Professionals and The Big Knife. He wasn't just a one-dimensional bad guy, he was a man with his own principles and motivations, even if they weren't always aligned with what the audience might expect. This complexity was something Smith wanted to emulate, portraying his characters as more than just tough exteriors but individuals who had depth, conflicts, and motivations that could complicate their own brand of toughness. Palance also had a natural, effortless way of commanding a scene, which Smith admired. He didn't need to raise his voice or be overly dramatic. His quiet but menacing delivery was enough to steal the spotlight in every scene. This made Palance one of the most captivating actors of his time, and someone Smith aspired to be more like in terms of commanding a room or a moment with just his physicality and presence. Smith often reflected on the impact Palance had on the genre, recognizing that the actor's tough guy persona was about more than just his roles. It was about how he embodied that persona in real life. There was a certain kind of toughness that Palance brought to the screen, one that wasn't about displaying sheer strength, but about maintaining control, even when chaos was all around. For Smith, this kind of composed but menacing strength was something that made Palance a true legend in Hollywood tough guy lore. And there you have it, the tough guys who shaped Hollywood and left an indelible mark on the action genre. From the stoic intensity of Charles Bronson to the rebellious spirit of Steve McQueen, these legends were more than just actors. They embodied an era of raw masculinity, unflinching toughness, and undeniable charisma that still resonates with audiences today. William Smith's admiration for these men is a testament to the timeless power of their performances and the lasting impact they had on him as an actor. It wasn't just about the stunts or the muscle, it was about presence, conviction, and the ability to create unforgettable characters that continue to define what it means to be a tough guy in Hollywood. But the stories don't end here. These actors, with their iconic roles and legendary on-screen personas, paved the way for a new generation of tough guys, each bringing their own flair to the genre. As we look back on their careers, we're reminded that tough isn't just about physical strength. It's about resilience, authenticity, and the courage to stand tall in the face of adversity, both on and off the screen. What do you think? Did we miss any of your favorite Hollywood tough guys? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of William Smith's most respected co-stars, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you won't miss any of our future videos on the legends of Hollywood. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay tough.